I should have known better. I wanted it so bad that I let it cloud my judgment. A guy like me never gets a girl like Marcia. Maybe in the movies, but not in real life. 3 years ago, Marcia started work in the office of SSA, that is, Safety and Security Affiliates. All of the male employees were aware of her presence, mainly because she was a notch above the other office girls. She wasn't smarter or better educated, but prettier and sexier. She didn't wear a wedding ring. My infatuation with her quickly waned because I immediately knew that she was totally out of my league. Hell, I wasn't even in a league. The only girls, or women, that I ever had any relationships with were the ones that charged by the hour. I wasn't a virgin, but that was only because I worked up the courage on several occasions to approach one of the less ferocious-looking ladies of the night. Actually, I found a few of the younger ones attractive, but all they wanted from me was my money. I couldn't even find a 304 that would want to spend any one-on-one time with me, if there was no cash involved. I was raised by a single mother. I never met my father. I guess that might have something to do with my lack of social skills with the ladies. My mother noticed the problem and really tried to help me. I spent almost 2 years going to ballroom dance classes with her, but all I got out of it was the ability to dance. I still lacked the confidence and courage to meet and relate to the opposite gender. After I finished school, my mother married and moved to Florida. We talked several times a year, but that is the only contact that I have had with her. I liked working for SSA because it didn't require me to interface with too many people. My days were spent inspecting fire detection and alarm systems. The company was also active in installing security systems, which I had no interest or involvement in whatsoever. After work, I had no social life. In the evenings, I enjoyed working through logic problems and had subscriptions to all of the puzzle magazines. Although I had a home computer, I only used it when I had to. Most of my meals came out of the microwave oven. I was a fussy eater, and I guess that is why I never weighed over 150 pounds. Light for my height, but healthy. I didn't even own a suit, because I never needed one. During the day, I wore my work dickies that were supplied by the company. I even wore them on the weekends when I wasn't working. There was a landline phone at the house, and I had a company cell phone. The cell phone had unlimited minutes, so I used it whenever I called my mother. Contacts bothered my eyes, so I always wore glasses. They were not stylish, cool ones, but rather practical, as a nerd would wear. Actually, I think I was a nerd. My interactions with people were always within careful limits. I didn't piss people off, and I didn't excite them either. I had no opinions that were worth sharing, and I was the world's worst joke teller. Now that you have a pretty good idea of what I had to offer the world, you can fully understand why I was surprised and stunned when Marcia Trent started casually chatting with me on a daily basis. I was not the only one to notice her interest, and after a few short weeks, I was getting teased about it from the other office girls and some of the guys. I was flattered, but confused. I remember how it all started. "Dennis, could you please do me a small favor?" I was sitting at one of the tables in the break room having lunch. I assumed that she wanted to borrow a chair or ask me to move to another table. "Sure, anything. Would you sit with me while I eat lunch?" All I could do was nod. A few minutes later, I was still trying to figure out what was going on. Other employees noticed, and a few quiet comments were made. As was my nature, I did not speak. There was nothing that I could say that wouldn't make me look like an idiot, so I kept my mouth shut. "I hope you don't mind, but this is a lot easier for me." "Easier how?" She seemed to be arranging herself before answering, as if she was getting ready to give a prepared speech. At that point, I should have realized what was going on. When I come in for a break or to have lunch, some of the other guys always sit with me. It makes me uncomfortable. They are either making crude remarks or undressing me with their eyes. "It is better being with you." Well, I didn't know if that was a compliment or an insult. I felt a little defensive. "That is understandable. You are an extremely attractive woman, and any man that didn't fantasize about you would be brain dead." "Do you fantasize about me?" "A little, but I try not to let it show. And you do an excellent job of it. That is why I need to sit with you. As long as I am with you, the other guys won't bother me." That didn't make sense at all. There was nothing intimidating about me. How in the world would my presence discourage a lowlife from making a remark or from even leering at her? I finished eating and sat silently until she was done. Nobody bothered us, but we got a few unusual glances. As I got up to leave, she touched my arm. "Can you sit with me again tomorrow?" I smiled, nodded, and walked away confused. A week later, we started having conversations. It was difficult for me, but she made it a lot easier. I discovered that she was a single mother with 2 girls in grade school. Her working shift corresponded with their school hours. She never mentioned a husband, ex-husband, or father figure. I was too lame to ask. My spirits were up, and I felt normal for a change. A regular guy was getting to spend time with a gorgeous girl on a routine basis. I didn't care that it was lunch in a company break room. Our contacts grew more frequent, and I started to feel comfortable with her. At the same time, I was feeling uneasy. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. After a few weeks, she invited me to her home to meet the girls and have supper. Brandy and Brenda were cute little things, but a little too well-mannered for my taste. Children under 10 are supposed to be rambunctious and noisy. I felt as if I was spending the afternoon with Stepford children. Actually, Marcia was a little like a Stepford wife. They were perfect, too perfect. Marcia and I started to go on little outings together. Of course, the girls were always with us. We hit all of the parks, zoos, and other similar attractions within a day's drive. The more time that I spent with the girls, the more relaxed they became. Before I knew it, I was looking forward to seeing them every chance that I got. I don't remember how it happened exactly, but one night after about 4 months, I found myself in bed with her. When I play the events of the night back in my head, it always comes out the same way. I didn't do a thing to initiate it. She took the lead and seemed to control everything: the place, the time, and what we did. Now, I am not complaining. It was the first time that I got any without having to pay for it. I can't say that it was wild, passionate sex, but it was the real thing. After the first night, we started to enjoy ourselves on a regular basis. At least I was enjoying myself. I was never sure about her. My life had suddenly taken a very different turn, but something wasn't right. To everyone's amazement, Marcia and I married 2 months later. It was a small ceremony. My mother flew up from Florida to meet the daughter-in-law that I believe she never expected to have. I paid for her ticket. Most of the people that attended the wedding were from work. Marcia's mother, in Mount Carmel, was not able to make it. I had never met her or any other members of Marcia's family. She never talked about them. We found a small house to rent, just until I could get a 20% down payment saved up. I was always cautious when it came to financial matters. Marcia no longer had to work and became a stay-at-home mom. We had sex on a regular basis, which I always enjoyed. For some reason, Marcia always insisted that we use a protection. I had a perfect wife, with 2 perfect daughters. It was like the Twilight Zone. After the first year, I had figured that things would mellow out for me, but that never happened. Every day was the same, and the longer it went on, the more paranoid I became. I would sit quietly some evenings and try and figure out what was wrong. The problem was that nothing was wrong. Marcia was a great wife, a great mother, and a wonderful partner. I started to think that I was going nuts. I was messing with my own mind and I couldn't stop. Why? Why was this happening to me? Why did I insist on ruining my own life? The best part of the marriage was the time that I got to spend with the girls. I think that they enjoyed it as much as I did. I am a logical person. I like to analyze things and draw conclusions. It is my nature. There was no reason why I couldn't look at this situation and figure some things out. I had no intention of turning into some type of prying busybody, but I would have to start paying attention and looking into things. I made a mental list of questions that needed to be resolved. Why had I never met any of Marcia's family? What was she really doing when she went to visit her mother in Mount Carmel several times a month? Why was the father of the girls such a mysterious figure? The one question that I needed answered first was what she kept in the small locked file box on the shelf in her clothes closet. The only time I had seen her with it was when she registered the girls for school. I didn't even know where she kept the key. Finding out what was in the locked box would be my first step. It was a logic problem, a real-life logic problem. All of a sudden, I found myself looking forward to something and not making myself paranoid. My attitude changed for the better. Marcia had a standing hairdresser's appointment at the Elegance Chic every Tuesday morning. It was an extremely expensive salon, but I never saw it come up on the charge cards. I guessed that she was paying it with cash, but she never seemed to have a lot of cash on hand, and I saw no evidence of any unusual cash withdrawals. Of course, I had no real idea of what a visit to the hairdressers should cost, so I had no point of reference. It just seemed odd. I had no trouble swinging by the house in the middle of the morning on Tuesday. I waited until just after she left to go into the house. While I was standing in front of the closet, I started to worry that she might have a tell placed on or near the box. I thought about it for a few moments and then discarded the notion. She was confident in her position in the house and that her box would not be bothered. After all, I was the good guy. I was the one that she could trust. I would not pry under any circumstances. I carefully took the box down and started working on the lock. It was a simple flat key with some very basic notches. It took less than 2 minutes to open it. Inside, I found her birth certificate. There was nothing special there. She also put our marriage license in the box. There were a few newspaper clippings and some photographs. One of them was her high school prom picture. She was as pretty then as she was now. Her date from the prom looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. The last things in the box were the 2 birth certificates for the girls. They were both born at the Pottsville Hospital, but the most interesting thing was the name of the father. Hamilton Ryder was listed as the father of both Brandy and Brenda. Now I recognized the guy in Marcia's prom picture. Hamilton Ryder was a state assemblyman and had been selected to run for the United States House of Representatives seat at the next election. He was good-looking and charismatic. The women voters all loved him, and the men admired him. He was a shoo-in to be elected. He was married to Emily Wilcox, the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in the northeastern part of the state. Some people had said that Hamilton's rise in the political world was based on the support that he got from his father-in-law. Emily Wilcox was a paradox. Their marriage was a big deal, and at the time was in all of the newspapers and several magazines. When they got married, she was a dowdy, mousy little thing. Over the years, she seemed to change, and not for the better. At some point, she dyed her hair blonde and started to wear it in styles that did not seem to fit her. Her makeup slowly became a little over the top. Too much rouge, too much plucking, and too much lipstick. The worst thing that changed was her attire. The whole thing was a little sad. Her personality did not fit her appearance. I had often wondered if she knew that people were laughing behind her back. Of course, it was not my affair, so I didn't wonder too much, until today. Marcia shouldn't notice that the box was moved or opened. I was quite careful. I really didn't believe that she accessed the box too often. From what I know now, I didn't see why she would. Actually, it would have made more sense for her to keep the box at her mother's house. So now I knew a little more than I had known before. Marcia had been friends with Hamilton Ryder in high school, and she was the mother of 2 of his children. Actually, they were his only 2, because he had none with Emily. It was interesting that Marcia put his name on the birth certificates. Under the circumstances, it seemed like something he would not want. I was a good husband that evening as usual. I complimented my wife on her hair and asked the girls how school went. For the first time, I felt like a phony. It was a game. Marcia knew what the game was and had been playing it for over a year now. Since I was new, I had to develop my own strategy of some sort. Just the word strategy implied that it would be long-term. I wasn't happy with that, but had no short-term, tactical plan in mind. That evening, as my Stepford family was watching TV, I ordered a bug GPS tracker from eBay. Buy it now, for $139 with free shipping. I decided that it would be interesting to find out where Marcia was going when she went to visit her mother. The new tracker would go well with my Garmin GP SMAP 60 CSX. This was going to be fun. As a defensive move, I set up some new bank accounts to start protecting my few assets. The next day, I quietly took 2 weeks of sick leave. The company was more than happy to see me take it for monetary reasons. Marcia never really made any friends at SSA, so I didn't have to worry about her finding out that I wasn't at work. Later that morning, I stopped in to see Seymour Schlamp. Seymour and I went to high school together. We were 2 of the out kids who built a friendship based on not being part of the crowd. Seymour got a law degree, but had no job. He was on the state, county, and city lists, waiting for somebody to die, so that there would be a job opening. In the meantime, he was supporting himself and his mother by doing mainly automobile renewals and transfers. He also did some notary work and wills. I needed some legal advice and Seymour was more than happy to help. We spent an hour together, and when I left, he was excited as a kid with a new puppy. I drove over towards Allentown and had lunch at a McDonald's. They had free Wi-Fi and I had my laptop. An hour later, I had all sorts of data and information about Hamilton Ryder. Most of what I got was political rhetoric, but mixed in with it was some information that I could use. I also ended up with a long list of addresses that I would need later. While I was surfing, I ran across an ad for a travel trade show that was being held in Philadelphia over the weekend. Marcia and the kids were going to visit her mother Friday after school, so I decided that the trade show looked good. After supper that evening, I did something that I had never done before. While Marcia was taking her evening shower, I took it upon myself to look through her purse. I had never considered violating her privacy like this before, but now we were playing a game. Everything looked normal and I was about to close up when I noticed something. In the bottom of her purse was a small sachet-like bag with Kotex printed on it. Like any normal man, I avoided handling it. I picked it up and gingerly opened it to find an old Nokia cell phone. It only took me a minute to figure out that it was a prepaid cell phone with T-Mobile service. There was only one number in the call log. The phone was turned off when I found it, so I left it the same way. I would have no trouble finding out who owned that number. I think I already knew. Seymour was in a good mood. He had several folders laid out on his desk in a neat row. He seemed anxious for me to sit down so that he could show me what he had done. "Dennis, I know that you said you wanted a simple divorce, but under the circumstances you have some pretty good grounds for an annulment. The nice thing about that is that Marcia cannot contest it, and there is no division of assets. You each keep what you brought into the marriage." "Are you sure? That would make things a lot easier. A lot faster also." Seymour pushed the first folder aside. "What else?" I had no trouble getting copies of the girls' birth certificates. Legally, Hamilton Ryder doesn't owe you any support for taking care of the girls. If it went to court, we would get creamed in the first 5 minutes. However, the court of public opinion will have a field day with it. I suggest that we file for it and make sure that the media is fully aware of it. That will be your responsibility. Why? I am paying you. For legal services, Dennis. If I get caught participating in a smear campaign, especially against a public official, my potential career as a lawyer is over before it is started. All right, what do I have to do? It is all printed out on this top sheet. Memorize the instructions carefully and then burn the paper. That is a joke, right? I heard a groan from across the desk. Yeah, sorry, but I was just trying to make things a little easier. The next folder was an alienation of affection charge against Hamilton. Seymour didn't feel that this one would fly either, but it could be valuable in the same manner the previous folder was. The next one related to the recovery of expenses for supporting Marcia for the last year. It had nothing to do with the girls or his paternity for them. The last folder was not directly connected to me in any way, but was a petition to have charges brought against Hamilton Ryder on 6 different civil violations that were very remotely related to situation. In one of them, Seymour was actually charging Hamilton Ryder with trade. He was claiming that Hamilton forced Marcia to trade sex for room and board for herself and the girls. It was another long shot, which he had absolutely no chance of winning, but that would get a lot of saucy publicity. There were still a few holes that needed to be plugged, including at least one example of proof of any clandestine relationship between the two of them. I hoped that that one would be taken care of this weekend. Marcia was surprised to see me when I came home for lunch later. I wanted to be there when the mail was delivered. She seemed happy for the company and made us some grilled cheese sandwiches. I tried my best to make polite conversation until the mail came. She noticed the priority package and commented on it. I told her it was a removable hard drive that I had ordered to back up the computers. She accepted the answer and I left smiling. For the next hour, I carefully read all of the installation and operating instructions for my new GPS tracker. It was going to be fun. I planned it that way. That evening, while Marcia was cleaning up the supper dishes, I installed the new tracking device in her car. It was easier than I had anticipated. I had already installed the monitoring unit in my car earlier. I was looking forward to the weekend. If everything went as planned, I would be able to attend my travel show in Philly with no problem. Brandy and Brenda were watching Shrek for the 10th time and Marcia was halfway through the latest Danielle Steele novel. I just sat and wondered what might have been if the situation had been a little different. I thought that I had what most men wanted, and then I discovered that it was all a farce. It was like a cruel joke, and I was the punchline. I would have been happy with the situation the way that it was, but that never would have happened under normal circumstances. Marcia was not the wife who I always dreamed of having. She put out some bait and I grabbed it because I wanted it. It hurt knowing that she didn't want me. She wanted what I could do for her. I still was not able to figure out exactly what that was. Hamilton Ryder could have just put Marcia and the girls up in an apartment or condo someplace. Why did the two of them feel that it was necessary to use me in this elaborate scheme? I imagined that she had some feelings for me, but if that was so, she would have realized how much I would have been hurt when the truth came out. She didn't care. It became apparent that I was disposable. The more that I thought about it, the madder I became. I excused myself, claiming a headache, and went to bed early. I was still awake when Marcia slid in beside me, but I didn't let her know that. The next morning, I spent most of my time in Seymour's office. He had let his girl have the day off. I spent an hour making copies of the papers that Seymour had drawn up on the computer and 2 more hours collating and putting them in mailing envelopes. Seymour had made shipping labels to all of the local newspapers and television stations and several of the national ones. It was all pure crap. I knew it and Seymour knew it, but the media would eat it up, we hoped. He also made labels for all state legislators and for everyone in Hamilton's family and the Wilcox family that we could get addresses for. I was expecting to get sued and I didn't care. I was anticipating the evening trip, even though it was no longer necessary. I was going to go ahead with the dastardly plan no matter what happened tonight. It was more for my self-satisfaction than anything else. The GPS tracker was nice because it took a lot of pressure off the one doing the tracking. I used the drive up to the coal regions as a test run. I knew approximately where Marcia was going, which made it easier. I was expecting her to go to Mount Caramel, but she never did. She parked at a shotgun house in the middle of Frackville and let the girls out of the car. A lady that looked as if she was Marcia's sister came out of the house to greet them. It was like old home week. It was hello and goodbye, all within 5 minutes. An hour later, Marcia got off of the interstate near Pocono Pines. The GPS took me to the Pocono New Moon cabins. The actually cabins were not as I expected. All of them looked as if they should be on an aspen ski slope, not tucked in the Pennsylvania woods. Marcia drove right past the office and went to the largest cabin at the end of the road. I was close behind, but instead of following her, I stopped at the front office. The desk clerk was very accommodating even though there were no vacancies for the night. I picked up a few brochures and indicated that I would like to look around the grounds a little bit before leaving. He smiled and thanked me for stopping in. I casually walked down by the small lake that was in the center of the compound. Marcia was still sitting in her car. It looked as if she was on her cell phone. I got comfortable on one of the lakeside benches and wished I hadn't left my jacket in the car. About 20 minutes later, a black Mercedes-Benz pulled alongside Marcia's car. Hamilton Ryder and my wife got out of their cars at the same time. There was a quick peck of a kiss, like a married couple would do, and then they both went into the cabin. My questions were mostly answered. There was no longer any doubt about what was going on. I still didn't know why, but I knew what. On the way back to the office, I passed by their cars. Marcia had a small travel bag on the back seat. I contemplated taking it with me, but changed my mind at the last minute. About halfway home, my cell phone rang. It was my wife. I didn't answer, and she chose not to leave a message. I assumed that she was just calling to let me know that everything was okay. I didn't care. Saturday morning came and I was on the Schuylkill Expressway going to the National Travel Expo show. It cost me $10 to get in, but I didn't care. I had an idea in mind, and it involved cruise ships. Almost all of the vendors at this show were directly interested in people who were wanting to be connected to some form to the travel world. Some were selling franchises and computer programs. A few of them were trying to recruit people. They were my target. I was able to sit with employment representatives from 3 different cruise lines. Only one of them expressed any interest at all in a licensed certified fire alarm systems inspector. 2 of them insisted on a merchant marine certification, something that I hadn't anticipated. The 3rd line, Mediterranean Holiday Lines, was only slightly interested until I mentioned that I was an accomplished ballroom dancer. For some reason, They seemed to think that was more important than my fire inspection qualifications. I left the travel show a little dejected. I was hoping for a better response than I actually got. I didn't plan too well, and the results proved it. At home that evening, I got a surprise telephone call from Brandy and Brenda. Of course, I didn't get to talk with Marcia, but the conversation with the girls seemed real and sincere. I didn't ask them where their mother was because I didn't want to ruin the moment. Sunday morning, I got a surprise call from the rep at Mediterranean Holiday Lines. They offered me a 6-month contract on one of their Mediterranean island cruise ships. Although I was not qualified as a maritime inspector, they would be able to use me as a records keeper and report generator. I wasn't sure what all that entailed, but they seemed fairly confident that I was up for the job. The big catch was that I had to spend my evenings dancing with the guests. Hundreds of elderly, single women took the cruises every year, and they all wanted handsome, charming men to dance with. I never considered myself as handsome and charming, but hell, I was willing to give it a try. I was expected to bring a formal black tux and a white tux jacket with me. I accepted, and within the hour, they emailed an employment contract for my signature. They had already scheduled a flight out of Philadelphia for me the next Friday. The tickets would be waiting at the counter. I always knew that I had that passport for some reason. That evening, Marcia seemed to be a little quieter than usual. Normally, when she came back from the visits to her mother, she was peppy. Friday seemed like a long time away. I realized that I was not going to be able to fake it for that long. I decided that Tuesday morning, while the girls were in school and Marcia was at the beauty salon, would be the best time to make my move. Monday was quite a busy day. I took all of the prepared envelopes from Seymour's office down to the post office. The earliest that any of them would be delivered should be Wednesday. I gave Seymour $5,000 to cover his fees and expenses. After giving my notice at work, I spent the rest of the morning closing accounts. One of the local tuxedo rental shops sold used outfits. Luckily, I was able to find 2 that actually fit. Since I needed a place to keep my new work clothes, I ended up renting a cheap motel room for 4 nights. I drove by the house as Marcia was leaving. I had no idea where she was going, but I figured that I would take advantage of the opportunity. After loading all of my things in the car, I realized that I didn't actually own much. I felt a little sad as I drove down the street for the last time. I was going to miss married life, even though it was a farce. The girls and I never seemed to warm up to each other, but I knew that I would think about them. It was a sorry situation. I felt hurt and cheated, but not enough to blow up. The only way out for me was to quietly disappear. I rented a storage unit and prepaid it for a year. Even though it was the smallest unit, the amount of stuff that I had looked pitiful. That night, I went overboard at Taco Bell. I got all of the items on the menu that I had never tried before. I can't explain why I did it, except that I was feeling a little reckless. Of course, most of the tray went into the trash. I couldn't force myself to eat it all. Later, sitting alone in the room, I was bored out of my head. Just on a whim, I called British Air. A very agreeable young lady was more than willing to move my Friday reservation to Tuesday. Friday was the busiest day for the airlines and Tuesday was a little slow. Seymour drove me to the airport the next morning. He was going to keep my car for me while I was gone. I signed the title and told him that he could sell it if he could find a buyer. It was almost 15 years old, so we both laughed when I suggested it. The check-in went very smoothly, and then I found myself sitting on a long plastic bench watching the departure times change. I was totally surprised when my cell phone started to buzz. I forgot to turn it off. Dennis? Is this you? This is Brenda. I was not expecting any calls, let alone that one. Yes, it is. Why are you calling? Brandy and I wanted to say goodbye. We were sorry when we found out that you left. Brenda, is your mother there? No, she is in the bedroom. She has been there all morning. I didn't know what to say. Dennis? Yes? Brandy and I wanted to let you know that we tried real hard not to be bad. Mommy said that it was important. We weren't bad, were we, Dennis? You are not, Brenda. You and your sister were always perfect angels. You didn't do anything wrong. Then why did you leave? I am sure that your mother would rather explain that to you. Did you ask her? She has been in bed, crying since yesterday. We had to get our own breakfast. I felt that I should talk to Marcia, but under the circumstances it didn't seem like a good idea. Dennis, If Brandy and I did anything bad, we are sorry. Can you come home? I don't think so, honey. I have to go away for a while. I could hear her crying on the other end of the phone. I was looking for a way to end the conversation without acting like a perfect shit when they announced the boarding for my flight. I have to go now. You take care of your sister and your mom, okay? I clicked off my phone before she could say anything else. Then I turned the phone off. I wouldn't be needing it for the next 6 months anyway. I found my life on the cruise ship to be fascinating. In the mornings, I was working with one of the ship's engineers, and I spent every evening dancing with enthusiastic ladies. Some of them were young, but most of them were as old or older than my mother. Since I learned to dance with my mother, that made things a lot easier for me. I actually found it to be fun. Most of them did not speak English, so I did not have any heavy conversational demands put upon me. I got by very well with a smile and an occasional peck on the cheek at the end of a dance. They all seemed to enjoy that. Things changed as I started on my 5th voyage. The first day out, I was informed that I would be dining at the captain's table that evening. The only crew members that ever got to sit with the captain were high-ranking. I was at the bottom of the food chain, so my invitation was unusual. The only dress clothing that I had were my 2 tuxedos. I usually ate in the crew mess and attire was not a factor. Since I had no idea about protocol or proper table manners, I waited until everyone else was seated before approaching. An empty chair was waiting for me. I addressed the captain, as expected, and then gingerly sat down. I was, to say the least, extremely uncomfortable. I glanced around the table trying to figure out why I was there. On my left was a large, sweaty man who seemed to be speaking Greek. On my right was a well-dressed lady my age who seemed vaguely familiar. When I glanced her way, she was looking slightly at me and smiling. I quickly looked away. As the meal was being served, I tried to pay attention to what the guests were chatting about, but to no avail. I was a poor conversationalist to start with, and the multiple languages didn't give me any confidence at all. This meal from hell would soon be done. I kept telling myself that, over and over. As they were bringing the dessert course, I felt a hand on my right arm. I turned my head and she started to speak. "Relax, Dennis. You seem awful tense." No one had ever introduced me, yet she knew my name. I realized that this must be the connection. The reason that I am at the captain's table. Who was she? How did she know my name? What did she want? It wasn't mysterious and exciting. It was scary and unnerving. The meal from hell would be over soon. The meal from hell would be over soon. When we finished, the guests started to wander off to do whatever they had scheduled. I was still sitting when the mysterious lady took my arm and walked me to one of the quiet bar areas. I was following her like a puppy dog and didn't know why. "You have no idea who I am, do you?" I just nodded in the affirmative. She laughed a little. "Imagine bleached, blonde hair, and lots of makeup. Oh my God, you're Dolly Parton." My poor attempt at humor got me a poke in the ribs and another small laugh, more like a giggle. "You are not paying attention, Dennis. Think." I knew what the answer was, but knowing it just generated more questions. "Emily Ryder?" She smiled at my answer. "I prefer to use my maiden name." "Okay, Emily Wilcox?" Neither of us said anything as a cute little Thai waitress set down our drinks. "Mrs. Wilcox, I realize that we are sort of connected, but I don't understand how that would cause you to be here. Don't complicate things, Dennis. I am just here to thank you. You probably don't realize the impact that you have had on my life." "Absolutely not. I never met you before, or have even seen you close up. Of course, you look a lot different than you did before. Good or bad?" "Good. Without a doubt, good. Thank you." Most of it was just hair and makeup. At that moment, she caught me looking at her. She couldn't help laughing at my discomfort. I think I was blushing. There was a lull in the conversation, so we both took a sip of our drinks. "Oh, before I forget, I have something for you." Emily reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope that had been folded in half to fit. She was smiling as she handed it to me. "It's your marriage annulment. Daddy was able to get it processed with no problems. Not only are you not married, you never were. Isn't that great?" Her words were bittersweet. She seemed happier about the annulment than I was. It wasn't something that I wanted, but something that I felt I needed. I had gotten used to the idea of being married. I wanted to be married, but under different circumstances. I gave Emily a small smile and said, "Thank you. You don't sound very happy, Dennis." I am not. The whole situation was a little painful for me. I waved to the waitress for 2 more drinks. I usually limit myself to 1 a night. I don't want to be poking my nose anywhere that it doesn't belong, but what is the status of your marriage? Are you, or will you be getting a divorce? Emily Wilcox squirmed a little, looked at her watch, and smiled again. Dennis, in exactly 22 minutes, I will be a widow. It was an interesting statement. I tried to think of a clever response, but nothing developed. The impact of her statement finally reached my brain, and I was numb. The waitress set down our round of drinks, and mine was gone in 1 gulp. Don't look so shocked. It was a trade-off. What does that mean? In 7 more days, you were going to die in an automobile accident just south of Pottsville. 2 days later, I was going to drown in a boating incident off of Long Island. It was all planned out. The conversation was no longer light and casual. My drinking companion was no longer smiling, and the whole tone had become somber. I was absorbing the few bits of information that she had just given me, and I started to feel nauseous. I am sorry, Mrs. Wilcox. I am afraid that this last drink was a little too much for me. Please excuse me. I got up and started to leave the room. She didn't try to stop me. I actually did feel upset in the stomach, but I don't think it was from the drinks. I didn't sleep well that night. Rather than eat with the crew, I waited until the first breakfast seating and then located Emily. She was at a table alone, a luxury reserved for only the most affluent guests. The waiter recognized me in my work clothes, and we got a quizzical look. Emily nodded to indicate that it was okay. She slid her full glass of orange juice across the table to me as a gesture of welcome. Are you a widow now? Emily gave me a telex that had been on the seat beside her. Kingston, Jamaica. Hamilton Ryder, a Pennsylvania state politician, was killed today about 30 miles east of Montego Bay. No one else was hurt in the 1-car accident. Mr. Ryder leaves a widow, Emily, but no children. Mrs. Ryder was not with her husband at the time of the accident. Hamilton Ryder had been a candidate for a U.S. Senate seat until allegations of impropriety mysteriously appeared several weeks ago. I scanned through the rest of the message and was amazed at the impact that my silly little mailing endeavor had produced. The waiter set a small plate of fruit in front of me, which I started to pick at. What is going to happen to Marcia and the girls? Nothing, Dennis. She was no longer involved. I guess you had no way of knowing. What do you mean? Shortly before you left, you followed the 2 of them to a cabin in the Poconos. Do you remember that? Of course. How did you know this? My father had the cabin bugged, and Hamilton was always followed. They used the same one each time that they met. You didn't stay long that day. Sometime after you left, Hamilton and Marcia got into a big argument about what he had planned. Marcia decided that she did not want anything to happen to you. Hamilton insisted that they stick to the original plan, which was to kill both of us. She refused and stormed out of the cabin. She spent the rest of the weekend with her sister in Frackville. That is where the girls were? Yes. Where the hell is her mother? Marcia's mother is in a nursing home in Pottsville. Hamilton has been paying for her expenses there. I finished the fruit and poured myself a cup of coffee from the carafe on the table. Why did he have to kill us? What did that gain him? We were never really sure, but it looks like he was hoping to get sympathy votes because he was a grieving widow. He would also inherit a hell of a lot of cash. I guess he hoped to further elevate his standings by marrying a widow with 2 young girls. Everything was planned to make him look good for the public. Sounds like a stupid plan to me. What would he gain by killing me? Of course I am a little biased. Both of us got a small snicker out of my weak attempt at black humor. Why did Marcia decide not to go thought with the plan? Dennis, you will have to ask her, but I think she was beginning to have feelings for you. She used me. From day one, I was just a tool to her. There is no way that she felt anything for me. Don't count on it. How do you know all of this? My father has been monitoring all sorts of stuff for over a year now. Okay, but tell me again, why you are here? My father is a very slow, meticulous man. We knew for a long time what was going on, and we knew that we had to end it. But according to him, the time was never right. I was pulling my hair out, trying to figure out how to get him to do something. Then a knight came to my rescue on a white horse. Thanks, but that is not the way I would ever describe myself. You still did not answer my question. When you flooded the world with all the lawsuits and publicity releases, things came to a head fast, real fast. You got my father off of his dead, and made me a happy woman. That wasn't my intent. I guess I wanted to get out of a bad relationship and let my feelings be known along the way. You did good, Dennis. You did real good. That is why I am here. To thank you. I smiled and got up from my chair. I am glad that all that has been taken care of. Now you have to excuse me, because I have to get to work. I am already late. Relax, Dennis. Your work schedule has been changed for the week. Daddy has talked to the captain, and your only job for the next 7 days will be to keep me company. I sort of shook my head in disbelief and walked away. I heard what she said, but can't say that I liked it. I really didn't want to spend the rest of the week entertaining a rich, spoiled brat. I had work to do. Chief Daggard, my immediate supervisor, was of no help. He sighed when he saw me and instructed me to go to the helm. I didn't get to see the captain, but the second mate informed me that everything that Emily Wilcox had said was true. As I walked back to my cabin, I realized that I didn't have any clothing that would fit in with what I was expected to do. I had 2 used tuxedos, some dicky work clothes, and the outfit that I wore when I boarded the ship. I changed into the best shirt and pants that I had and started looking for my new mistress. I found myself being used by a woman again, and I didn't like it. Was this my destiny? Would I spend the rest of my life as a whipping boy for dominant women? Maybe the word dominant is a little strong. In any event, I was not happy. She was reading a pocketbook while on the deck and sheltered from the wind. She smiled as I approached, but seemed anxious. I'm sorry if I upset you, Dennis. That was not my intent. I was hoping that you would get some satisfaction out of the arrangements that were made with the captain. Your reaction indicates that I was way off base. I sat beside her and tried to get comfortable. I never did like deck chairs. I was hoping that we could come to some sort of a compromise. I am willing to spend the days with you, and I will do everything that I can to be a good companion, but I feel that my evenings belong to the unaccompanied ladies that are on the cruise. You want to dance with them? Yes. There are several other men here that are doing the same thing, but there are never enough to go around. These women wait all day to dress up and go dancing. I can't let them down. Okay, I can accept that with a few restrictions. Between dances, you will sit with me, and I will get to select the women that you dance with. Why would you want to do that? I don't really know, but let's try it tonight. If it doesn't seem to work out, I will drop it. Okay, I'll give it a try. I don't understand why you want to do that, but I'll try. Good. This afternoon we will be stopping in Napoli, and I will be buying you a few clothes for the rest of the trip. I can afford it, and I will not take no for an answer. Any questions?
No.
We both laughed when we realized that I gave her the answer that she said she would not accept. The rest of the day was fun, but there were not enough days left on the cruise for me to wear all the clothing that she bought for me. In fact, I had no room in my cabin to store them. Most of the shopping booty ended up in her suite, by necessity. Emily and I had supper together, but not at the captain's table. After supper, I changed into my black tux for the evening. Emily had a small table for 2 reserved on the edge of the dance floor and was waiting for me. You look very elegant, Dennis. The tux suits you. Thank you, but I feel out of place. You are staring me. Do I look okay? You are absolutely beautiful. I can't understand why Hamilton did not appreciate what he had. I spent an hour in the ship's beauty salon getting ready for the evening. I am glad that you feel that it was worth the time. The dress fits perfectly. Before getting comfortable, I excused myself and walked over to the line of male companion dancers standing by the stage. Most of them were older men who got to take the cruises free in exchange for dancing with the guests 6 hours a night. They all loved the evenings and enjoyed entertaining the ladies. They were aware of my situation, but I still got a good teasing from them. Each of them promised to dance at least one dance with Emily that night. Emily enjoyed the evening more so than I would have ever expected. She had a different partner picked out for me every dance. The biggest challenge was a German lady in a wheelchair. I was unsure how to handle it until the lady herself made a few suggestions. She was the only one who I danced with twice. Emily got to dance several times, and a few were with other passengers. It was easy to understand why. She stayed with me until the band finished for the night. I walked her to her cabin and was rewarded with a kiss on the cheek and a sincere thank you. It was a wonderful evening as far as I was concerned. The week flew by. The last night of Emily's trip, she literally dragged me into her room and had her way with me. I got the feeling that she was a little disappointed with my lack of effort on the previous nights. Emily and I seemed to move together and fit together perfectly. For hours later, she was leaving to fly back home. She tried to convince me to go with her, but I didn't feel right about it. I still had 4 months to go on my contract. I promised to contact her as soon as I finished my obligation. It was a petty, stupid decision, but it was still important to me. For the next few weeks, I tried to convince myself that it only happened because she was recovering from the fallout with Hamilton. Sometimes I felt like a cad because I had taken advantage of a grieving widow. Then I remembered that she wasn't grieving, but rather celebrating. The more that I thought about it, the more I confused myself. I spent my mornings with the daily safety reports and maintenance logs. My nights were filled with dancing. I started to specialize in entertaining the ladies with handicaps. Emily Wilcox never sent a letter, an email, or any other type of correspondence. I also never heard from Marcia, but then she had no idea where I was. I found myself thinking about Brandy and Brenda a lot more than I expected to. I really missed them. I thought a lot about the situation that Marcia had put us into. I understood the basic concept of what she and Hamilton were trying to do, but I never understood why they decided to do it. It was easy to explain it all away in my simple brain, just by telling myself that I was just not sophisticated enough to comprehend it. Only Marcia could answer all the questions. My contract was up. The cruise line wanted me to sign up for another 6 months with a little bonus. They also offered to send me to a maritime school in London so that I could get certified in some areas related to the ship's electronic and safety systems. If I accepted the schooling, I would incur a full year's commitment with the company. I promised to give them an answer in 30 days. I was flattered to learn that several of the lady guests had requested the dates when I would be on board so that they could schedule their trips. Instead of flying home, I got a flight into Orlando. My mother was sharing a modular home near Ocala with a gentleman friend who turned out to be quite pleasant. Mom seemed to be genuinely upset that the marriage with Marcia didn't work out. My spirits were low as the plane landed in Philly. Going home was not something that I was looking forward to, but it had to be done. It was time to clear things up with Seymour. I wanted to make sure that I didn't owe him anything. I had no place to stay, no job prospects, and nothing to look forward to. It would have been a lot easier if I had planned ahead, at least a little. There was plenty of time in the last few months to look for a new job on the internet, or at least a new place to live, but there was also no motivation on my part. Most of the people departing the plane at the terminal were upbeat and excited, but I was with the second group, businessmen who were coming home with dead eyes and bored expressions. A whole chapter of my life had passed, and I had nothing to show for it except heartache. Watching the other passengers being warmly greeted by their friends and families only made my depression worse. All I had to look forward to was getting a rental car and driving back to the source of my misery. Dennis. Dennis. The sound of my name being yelled by some children got my attention, but just until I remembered that there were over 200 people on the flight and the chances that a family man on the flight had the same name as mine was pretty high. I smiled at my gullibility and kept walking. Dennis. Dennis. There it was again. This time I looked for the source and was surprised to see Brenda and Brandy running up to me. It didn't make sense. No one knew that I was even on the plane. It was only a matter of seconds until the both of them were grabbing at my hands. They never had acted this way before, and I found it to be confusing. Marcia could explain it, I was sure. The only problem was that Marcia was not there. Emily was. Emily waited with a smile on her face. I set my carry-on bag down and we traded cheek kisses, like you see posh people do in movies, but never see anyone do in real life. It seemed natural, and I didn't know what else was expected of me. We were walking towards the terminal exits when a guy approached and asked for my claim tickets. Emily nodded to me, and I handed them to him. A limo was waiting by the curb. The two girls were jabbering the entire time. In fact, they were talking more today than I had ever heard them speak before. I picked up words like limo and Aunt Emily, but I was unable to put any completed sentences together. Things were suddenly very quiet as the limo doors closed. The hustle and bustle of the terminal were behind us. "Welcome home, Dennis." Emily took my hand and smiled. I didn't get to respond. "Isn't it neat, Dennis? Have you ever been in a limo before?" I couldn't tell which one of the girls was talking. I looked over and smiled. I really had missed them. "No, never." Brandy started up again. "Dennis, we are going to have a sister. I want to name her Brittany, but Brenda wants to call her Bethany. What do you think, Dennis? What do you want to call her?" My head was spinning. There were a million questions waiting to be answered, but I was unable to formulate one. The new sister comment started to register. Was Marcia pregnant? And if so, where was she? I paused for a moment and then looked at Emily. She smiled and then glanced down at her stomach. Although it was too early to really feel anything, she put my hand on her stomach. When Emily had said that a protection wasn't necessary, I had assumed that she was on some sort of birth control. I guess I was wrong. "Dennis, are you happy to see us?" Brenda was trying to give me a little kick to get my attention, but the limo seat was a little too far away. "Yes, I miss the both of you very much and I am very happy to see you." I was rewarded with 2 big smiles and a hand squeeze from Emily. Am I going to get some sort of explanation? Emily leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. Maybe and maybe not. I decided that I really didn't need or want one. Shortly after I left, Marcia had contacted somebody in the state attorney's office. Although she had agreed to testify against Hamilton, it never got to trial or even close. Hamilton Ryder's demise brought everything to a complete stop. Somehow or other, a zealous public servant felt that Marcia had to be punished, and she was the one that got the short end of the stick. She ended up with 3 to 5 years for conspiracy to commit murder and a few other similarly ridiculous charges. An appeal is underway to have it all thrown out. Emily found out that Marcia's sister was not able to take care of Brandy and Brenda and volunteered to fill in. As amazing as it may seem, Emily and Marcia actually became friends. I am presently living with Emily and the girls. As soon as Marcia gets out of prison, we are all going on a week-long Mediterranean cruise. I am not sure what the sleeping arrangements are going to be, but I am sure that Emily will surprise me. I have 2 new tuxedos. Oh yes, I turned down the job. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.